11. So, welcome to Instig Labs podcast. We have today a very esteemed guest by Uzo James. Uzo James is an analyst in the Customer Intelligence Unit of MTN. MTN is Africa's largest network provider. It's a brand that is known for doing so much in the telecom space, from not just telecommunications, but also they are in finance. They're also pushing, the latest and greatest in technology by way of things like 5G. So it's no surprise that they are also customer centric, and that is why I think Uzo's role is quite unique because customer intelligence is at the heart of the modern business, and without it, really, you struggle to make any meaning of your customer interaction. So welcome, Uzo, and thanks for gracing us with your presence.
Thank you very much, Mike. Thank you, Steve.
Yeah. Okay. So do you want to just
Yes,
give the guest or the listeners rather a hint about who you are, what you do, and just kick the ball rolling
okay,
with your
great.
present. Yes. Thank you.
Cool. So, my name is Uzoamaka Nwaigwe. Some people choose to call me James because obviously that's my middle name or English name, as it were. Studied sociology, BSc from Bowen University. I
And
know
that's
that sounds strange from the future things we're going to be talking about, like what is the connection?
not really, not
All right,
really, because
so
I think like those in sociology have some bearing with human behavior. But yeah, sure.
exactly. So that's why it makes even much more sense that
Yeah.
I can combine both worlds, as it were. So I'm just going to put this down so I can see it. Yeah, so I can combine both world, as it were. So sociology, Bowen University, but in all of those, always had passion, interest in software development, eventually started doing data analysis at some point. It wasn't a thing then, but when I started writing Python, the little bit of data analysis we used to do then was just for processing of Excel. For example,
Okay.
say you want your backend to receive an Excel and you want to display the Excel on the front end, right?
Yeah.
So that was a little bit of data analysis we used to do when I first started the whole software development journey. So what do? I presently work with MTN Nigeria team of the customer relations department or division, as we call it in the business. So here's what we do. We care for our customers. MTN is always about the customers generally. You drive us, you're our market. We are connecting lives. We practically live for people. So the business then wonders, okay, how can we make sense of all of this data? So MTN is obviously business or data driven, and that's why people like me have come into the system, right, to see how we can contribute, especially with the growing range of 5G of data in today's world. Permit me, I'm just going to get my book. So yes, that's what we really do. So I do data analysis in MTN Nigeria. That's my day-to-day work. Go to work, spool the data, make sense of the data, right? That's what we do on a daily basis. Then after spooling the data, we obviously make sense of it, we clean it, we do all we need to do. So I also do data science, right? You may be wondering what the difference is between data analysis and data science. At some point we'll have to talk about it. I'm also a software developer. I write Python for backend development and
Awesome.
Java as well. Right, but that's not what I do at MTN. It's just what I do generally, right? So, how have I got here? I mean, which is the key thing we are discussing in today's the next 1 hour or 45 minutes at the very max. How did I get to where I am. I know that's the burning interest. I go on LinkedIn some days and I just see people put data analyst, data analyst on their journey, on their profiles. And I really wonder, okay, what do these people do? And this was before I went, fully into data analysis, or I should say before I started recognizing myself as a data analyst, right? So you see somebody who says he's a data analyst, and really what they do is data entry, right? You see
Interesting.
another person who says he's data analyst, and really what they do is just storytelling, right? So data analysts, data scientists, data everything data. But how have I got here? So first thing really is to learn the basics. Unlike every other person who started with Excel, I sincerely did not start with Excel. Like I said, my journey, all of my journey started with software development. So which means I came in from the Python place. Excel was like, I wouldn't say that I took maybe one whole year to learn Excel, because I was already using it consistently, at place of work. I was always having to check for all of those formulas that were required. Then every now and then you watch a YouTube video that, that really just boosts your productivity, right? So that's how I really learned Excel. Because of my coding background, I was able to think about it in a way that, what do I need to do? What you need to do. This is exactly what I tell people. If I need to transform a data and I'm thinking about what kind of transformation do I need? And I say to myself, okay, you know what? I want to convert everything to uppercase, right? Can you hear me? I'm hearing somebody. Okay. Okay, so
Yeah.
I,
I
I
hear you. Please go ahead.
okay, and I say, what I want to convert everything to uppercase. And I'm thinking, okay, uppercase, what can I do? How do I get to that place? So Excel as we have it does not have anywhere like Word, like Microsoft PowerPoint or Word, where you can just click on upper and everything in a particular column is upper, right? So
Mm.
when I first started learning, I'm like, okay, what do I need to do? And I just Google it. Right now, you even have ChatGPT helping you with that. But I just Googled it. I'm like, how can I achieve upper? How can I transform all columns to upper? And that's really how I started learning until I started taking courses. And as it were, the business really helped us, with taking some of the courses. But this was even before I joined MTN Business, right? So who am I? I'm not done. So I worked as a customer retention personnel with Swift Networks, which is also an internet service provider. That's where I started my early career, always thinking that I would go into tech from there. But it didn't turn out that I went full tech, supporting customers, learning about latest technologies, CRM duties, financial adjustment. That's what I was doing for Swift Networks. Then I would say I took a forced career break of some sort, to think about the whole process, about what I really wanted to do, who I wanted to be, right? After like 4 years plus in Swift Networks, so I have a Swift Networks background. Eventually, that's where I pivoted into software development. Then I resumed working with Providus Bank, foremost technology bank in Nigeria, arguably. Um, and worked as software development software developer, rather application developer in Providus Bank before moving to MTN, where I now do data analysis and building all of my services myself. So back to learning the fundamentals. You learn Excel, you learn the uppercase. You see, this is why learning Excel is cool, or would help you in your journey. Excel kind of prepares you for functions, right? The whole concept of functions, the whole concept of writing some sort of scripting, right? I know not a lot of people see it that way, but every time you write that equal to upper, full, concatenate, change the string, find the length, all of those things prepare you for actual functions. Functions here being lines of code that do something. Those are functions, lines of code that do something, that return a value or may not return a value. Good example, every time you put the upper equal to upper in your Excel row, and then you reference the exact row that you want, it returns the uppercase value of that particular row that you have referenced. So here's how that will help you. You already know that that value, that equal to upper returns a value. Now, the concept of function applies to all programming languages, right? It also applies to all scripting languages. You always have functions. You always have lines of code that have been written down for you, right? In a library, you always have these lines of code that return something. If you're looking for the date in Excel, it's a function that somebody has written. You just go and put your date and it gives you today's date. If you're looking for the current time, you're looking for the current month, all of these things are functions that have existed. So that's why Excel is cool. That's why it opens you up to what is coming. It opens you up to the journey generally. And so you then move to visualizations. That's obviously PowerPoint. I'm not one person who likes design. I sincerely struggle now, but here's the thing. When I struggle with design, it takes me hours, and by the time it comes, and somebody's like, you're good with this thing. I'm like, It took me hours, right? Because you're thinking of what the right color is, you're thinking of, what's the story you want to tell. That's the thing. What kind of color represents what you want to tell? You cannot just use red for something that is calm. You have to use maybe blue or green. You cannot use red for something that is bad, for something that is good, right? Because you're thinking, okay, green. You cannot use this color. You cannot use that color. So visualizations are something you should look at. And those who perhaps are into UI, UX, or who are already into CorelDRAW or into Adobe, any of those picture looking applications or picture editing applications, we'll find in visualizations, they can make sense of colors and make colors into stories. So yeah, visualizations was where I really just went into it. So I also picked up SQL, structured query language. SQL obviously means that I picked up SQL while working in the bank because we had to connect to the database. So there's no SQL and there's SQL. For some services as a data analyst, you have to write no SQL, which is simply no structured query language. In other words, you don't have rows and columns. You have tables with what they call some what of JSON format. I'd like to call it what's the name again? Pair values, right? Basically, you have a name and then you have a value. Key pair, that's the name, key pair, right? So there's SQL, which is row and columns like you have it in Excel, and then you have key and pairs for NoSQL. So by learned SQL, I also do NoSQL, MongoDB, but that's another one. Many of the databases in today's world in businesses, right, are usually SQL, but NoSQLs are too. They're usually good for unstructured data. We'll come to all of those. So yeah, and I learned Python. The question is, I told you that I already said at the start of this that my first love was, Python, and it was purely for backend engineering purposes, right? So Python has what you call a library. Library is simply a body of code written to do different functions, right? So all of the sum, the minus, the min, max, someone has written those codes. You don't need to rewrite them. You can rewrite them for learning sake or for implementing your own algorithm, right? But it's already existing. It's in existence. You just plug in and retrieve the library. Pandas is a Python library for data analytics, data analysis rather. Matplotlib is also one for data analysis, but this is more visualization, right? You want to do your bar charts, all of those things. You can use Matplotlib to achieve that. NumPy, data loading is also just like Pandas, different types of data to handle. What kind of file format are you handling? CSV, JSON, Excel, whatever file format you want to really pick up. I also do web crawling, because there are some days where the data you need is not readily available. I'm going to give you a typical example. I was building an application that was tracking that tracks some sites, right? And in order to build the application, I needed to get a location of a particular store or some stores, right? And there is no database where that exists. So what I did was I plugged into the web, just looked for a website that had those information, and I literally crawled through the website. So web crawling simply, that's what happens. I'm just going to divert a little bit. What happens with our GPT, ChatGPT, large language models, right? LLMs, is that they crawl through multiple websites, billions and billions of data, right? To get several things and make sense of all of this data. So there's some cases where the data you need is not necessarily available in-house or on-premise, right? So you do web crawling. So I do Python just in, whenever I need it, whenever the need arises, I write a script, just crawls a particular website and give me the information that I want, right? So then you have Skykit as well, which is for machine learning, TensorFlow for machine learning purposes, right? You want to do predictive analysis. You predict people's behavior, predict the number of people that will come into the store and all of those things. So yeah, to be a good software developer, you have to do data analysis and algorithms now, but that's by the way, because it really helps you understand the concept of data in today's world. Data here is not your browsing data, right? But data here is the type of information that you are passing. What we're looking at on my screen are purely what you call strings, right? What the SQL people will call VACA, variable character, right? What the Python people, it's still string anyway in Python, it's string in JavaScript, right? So strings being words, being letters in a quotation of some sort, right? So type of data, you're looking at this box and you're likely calling it, a text box with a border, right? They're just types of data. So knowing your type of data is really, really important for being a data analyst, because you're going to process all sorts of data, right? So I also learned R. R is a scripting tool. R is why Python is focused on, Python can be used for multiple things, scripting and development, both desktop and mobile. R is purely scripting, so R does not go beyond the bounds of scripting. And it's
stats, I think. Yeah.
Yes, and yes, and stats. So it's more focused on data analysis. So it's like your perfect tool. It's like when you compare two businesses. Okay, say you compare a bank, right, and a fintech in a sense. You see that the bank is a core banker, right? So it's the part of the technology may not be as robust as the fintech, because that's one's core business strategy is enabling businesses via technology.
Exactly.
Right. So that's the point. R is more on that whole scripting part than Python. Now, but Python is more robust than R, right? So which means R has more libraries for you to do more things. Now you may need to write longer code to achieve the same thing that R will just give you just a line of code.
Yeah, that's
so
right.
that's really so.
Yeah. So
yeah.
I have a question at this juncture. Your learning process has been, very broad. From you have Excel, you have Python, you have SQL, you have R also. If you could go back in time and do this again, how would you go about it? This learning journey, and what would be your advice for people watching right now who are like, okay, I want to be, a customer intelligence analyst, right? What is the fastest route to learning these tech skills that you would advise them to, take?
Great. Thank you for that question. So in retrospect, right, the fastest route is really just to practice, get a number of data. And here's where you start with. You start with Excel. Don't dwell too long on Excel. I've seen several data analysis processes, courses, offers. The basic is Excel. Because you can do everything on Excel, but you cannot do everything as fast, right, on Excel. So that's the key thing. Now, Excel can process, but Excel has a limit. Excel cannot process over 1.2 million rows or 1.2 something million rows, right? Which obviously slows down your PC if you're not using a high performing system as well, right? So you can do everything in Excel or most things in Excel, but it has its limits. So you learn Excel, don't dwell too much, learn the basics, then move on straight up, right, to Python because you are analyzing data. Now, but once you have a database, right, this is the fastest route. Let me just go over it again. You learn Excel, don't dwell long on Excel, right? Move to Python. Now learn the basics of Python because it's really important. I've seen people go into data analytics, right? And straight up they
Yeah.
want to just learn Python. It's very important to learn the very basics of programming in order to thrive in Python development or any other coding place. Because once you learn the basics of programming, you learn the data structures that exist. You learn syntaxes. The syntax can change, but the idea is the same thing, right? So learn the very basics of programming and you will excel in SQL and you will excel in Python. So learn Excel, learn Python, the very basics of programming and Python for data analysis. Then taking SQL because you'll be taking the data for yourself from the databases. Except, in some businesses, the data is handed over to you, right? So here's the thing. I use Python to process big data. You obviously know that the business I am in handles over 70 million customers or about 70 million customers. So, which means that I always have more than Excel can handle. So I use Python to process it. Right. So, but that's by the way. Yeah, did I answer the question? So you learn Excel, you learn Python, then
Yeah,
do
the
your
basics of
SQL.
programming. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay, that's
then do
yeah,
the
that's
SQL.
yeah, yeah. I think that really gives a very solid foundation, in my opinion, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then at some point for visualizations, you have to come into Power BI or Tableau, right?
Okay.
I'm sorry, I didn't even put Power BI here, but yeah, at some point I picked up Power BI as well. Okay, that's the visualization. So, or
Yeah.
Tableau. So, but the most important thing in all of this is having the opportunity to practice. That is really the key thing. So when I first did data analytics, it was not enough. I only had Excel of crime data. I could go to somewhere,
Yeah.
maybe crack Google. And
Online
because
courses.
there
Yeah.
is no, exactly, so there's no consistent need or there is no practical need
Recording in
or
progress.
application practical application of that whole thing,
Yeah.
you will lose it. You're going to lose you're going to lose it entirely because there is no practical application, right?
Yeah.
So look for opportunity to practice. By every means, there are statistics all over. Remember when COVID came out, people started to make sense of COVID. I saw one person put up Power BI dashboard of COVID. I was watching news back then. You watch the Arise TV, you watch AIT, you watch channels, you watch CNN. Everybody was using Power BI at that point to slice the data. The one that
Yeah.
really got was the time that they found that ship in the ship that got burnt by the military
Okay.
in
Okay.
Nigeria.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
when they were analyzing it on one of the stations, they had used Power BI to breaking down into the number of oil barrels that come
Okay.
in per state or assumed number of oil. And it was so good. It was, transformational. You just click and you see everything. So yes,
Awesome.
um, have the
Sorry,
opportunity to
yeah. I would like to draw you
go on.
back on that question because given the fact that people are looking at this from a customer intelligence aspect, what kind of data
Yeah.
would you say, okay, when you are getting started, learn all types of analytics, right? Or would you say pursue data sets that are within the customer intelligence space? And if you are giving that recommendation, like how would you ask them to get customer intelligence data? Because it's not really easy to come by, you know? So
Exactly.
yeah,
I mean, I'm going to come into thank you for the question. I'm going to come into customer intelligence part of it. But this is the data analytics skill set is transferable to any field.
Yeah, sure.
right? So when I first started this journey, I wasn't doing customer intelligence. I wasn't even in the business. I wasn't even MTN at the time.
Yeah.
Being a sociologist, I was looking at crime data. But what's the
Oh, yeah.
statistics of crime, predicting crime from data that already existed, right? So there are, at the end of this course, I believe I had included some places where people can get free data from that they can practice. You can engage in hackathons that are being hosted by Kaggle, right? There's datawars.io. So there
Yeah.
are hosts of data. Just last week or 2 weeks ago, I was playing with one. It was a premiership, the premiership records of last year,
Oh,
right?
cool. Yeah.
Table, and it really made so much sense seeing who scored the highest goals. So from it, you can even predict. You can build like a prediction of some sort of what is going to happen.
Exactly.
This, right?
Yeah.
So, but yeah, the point here is the data analytics skills is transferable.
Okay.
It's even sweeter when you are from that field and you are off that field because you then understand the why things are happening,
Exactly.
right? Now I can come into an oil place and analyze it, but I don't understand the why
Yeah.
because I am not originally from that field. Now we're going to get into that place because you don't always need to understand the why. If you have people, if your sponsor, in the sense, if the business needs, the person who requires the service is the why, so you can provide all the information and he explains it to you, right? But so look for the opportunity to practice. That's the really, really key thing. If not, you just lose all of it. You lose all of it, I guarantee you. So look for opportunities to practice and keep practicing. That's the best way to get really, really robust with it. So who is a data analyst, right? So simple terms, the person who is a data analyst is just somebody who who comes in, who cleans his data, who collects the data, he cleans the data, he visualizes the data, and he presents the data, right? So a data analyst collects data, he cleans the data, takes insights from the data, visualizes the insight, and presents the insight. Now, what kind of analysis can you have? You can have a predictive analyst, descriptive, diagnostic, and prescriptive. I've written this here. So the point here is you can either be describing a phenomenon, you can be describing something. So in my business now, they're like, oh, you know what? So I don't deal with the churn customers. We have a team, another business intelligence team that's responsible for churn. But we're looking at, okay, you know what? Why are customers making these complaints? That's my business. Why are they making that complaint? So the first thing I'm doing is I'm describing the problem that exists. Okay, so in the last 10 days, we've had 200,000 customers requesting for changing their plan. What is happening to that plan? I'm describing. Now, by the time I ask what is happening, I'm diagnosing, right? So I'm doing the diagnostic. I'm saying, okay, what is happening? Why are they doing this thing? Then I'm going into the main reason they call. And in some cases, you may even have to check the previous records of the customer. You're checking the spend of the customer. You're checking the previous plan of the customer. And then you're beginning to diagnose what could be the issue. Why did he change? And why does he want to change now? You could also be predicting, and I'm looking at all of this information I have, and I'm saying to myself, okay, this particular customer has a tendency to move, is 2 times likely to move next year or to stay. And because of that information, I can then say, you know what, let's prescribe something. Maybe this customer needs a new data, a new type of bundle. Maybe this personnel, what's in design thinking, you have personas, maybe they need this kind of bundle, right? They need this kind of bundle to achieve what they need to achieve. Now that's the whole prescribing thing. So you go from describing what the problem is, ask why the problem exists, then find out, would this problem exist in the future, or and then you find out what can be done, and then you then say, you know what, going forward, this is how we should act. That's really the whole process. And sometimes you're stuck in just doing descriptive because the person who needs the data just wants to know what is happening. Sometimes you're stuck looking at the diagnostic. You're just saying, what is the problem? What is the problem? What is the problem? How can I find it? Like, so it doesn't necessarily mean that you have all 4 processes every time, right? Sometimes you're just doing one part of it. Then what's the difference between a data engineer, data scientist, and data analyst? I mean, good question. Or I thought, because I always had the same thing, when do I become a data engineer? Am I a data analyst? Am I a data scientist? So for me, initially, I used to think I was just purely a data analyst, right? But eventually I've come to see that, I'm a data scientist, and I'm going to break it down. So who's the data engineer? Data engineer is responsible for your database. He's responsible that the database is available. He's like he's not your regular database engineer, but he's your data engineer in the sense that he knows the type of data that is being loaded. He ensures that the data is loaded in the right format, or she ensures that the data is loaded in the right format. The data engineer ensures that your data processing or collection of data is automated, right? He's the same person who ensures that your data is up to date. This data engineer obviously writes SQL, knows more tools, and it's more programming driven than the rest of the other bodies, than data science or data analyst. Now, who's the data scientist? Data scientist is the one that covers everywhere. He comes from the data engineer. He's the link between the data engineer and the data analyst, and sometimes the business. Now, data scientist knows the Python, writes the Python. He knows the moment you start moving into machine learning, you start moving into artificial intelligence field, you are more data scientist than you are a data analyst, than you even are a data engineer. So data scientist is concerned about the kind of data that is loaded. If you're loading pictures into it, he wants to know how can we transform that picture to a format that the data analyst can use, to a format that we can use for analysis purpose. So data scientist is more robust in the sense that he has all the skill sets of the data analyst, but he's not the data analyst. The data analyst's work is to collect that data that has been made by the data engineer, that has been looked through by the data scientist, right? And is now transferred to the data analyst. His work, data analyst, or he or she's work, is to look through the data, collect the data in its raw format. Now, functions of data analysts now is to collect the data. Wrangle, what's wrangle? Cleaning. Visualize the data. Sometimes after cleaning your data, you then look at it and like, I see. So there are 2 million customers. I see of these 2 million customers, 500,000 of them are males. 500,000 of them are under 14. 500,000 of them are living in Lagos. That is just your visualization. That's not your presentation. Now, the moment you're presenting is now when you begin to see the insight. You then say, there are 500,000 males, right, who are using this particular plan. Why are they using that plan? That's when you're presenting your data. You're making sense of it. You're not inside, you're generating insight at that point. So I'm going to go through it again. The data engineer is responsible for ensuring that your data loads to the database, that the data is available per time, that the data runs, that the data is updated on a daily basis. The data scientist is ensuring that the type of data that is being passed to the data engineer is the correct type the business needs. Data scientist also understands the business needs. He works with the business sponsor. Business sponsor is the person who's requesting for the data, who's requesting for the analysis. Data scientist also then works with the data analyst to ensure that he gets the kind of data that is required. Now, the data analyst collects the data, cleans the data to what he or she wants, visualize it. What can I make of this data? And then presents the data, then generates insight from it. Now, the data scientist work, the data scientist, based on what the data analyst has come out with, will now do a prediction, right, to build a machine learning model, right, and artificial intelligence basically of it. That's where data science is all encompassing, basically. So the skill sets that you need, okay, you know what? Yeah. What tools do you need? Excel, SQL, Python, Tableau, Power BI. As a data analyst, this is really what you need. Now, the part where you then begin to go into machine learning, model development, right, or creations, is when you are crossing into the data scientist field. But the very basics you need, very basic tools that you need as a data analyst, as an analyst rather, is what you have here: Excel, SQL, Python, Tableau, Power BI. At this point, I'm good for questions before we jump into another segment, right?
Okay, I think let's do it like this. If you have a question, just signify in the chat, so we can take it from the chats and just, forward the questions to UI why you present, because we're like 30 minutes gone already. So tell us how we can make this quicker.
Okay, so I'll just go on
Yeah,
then.
but if you have questions, please just you know yeah, via chat. Thank you.
Okay, so here's the sweet side now. You may be asking yourself, so why do I have to become a data analyst? Here's my thoughts usually. When I'm thinking about how to why do I need to do this thing? I've always believed that it's not enough to be a consumer of latest technology. So for me, I always want to be a creator. I always want to be part of it. I want to reap from it in the sense, right? So AI is there, and I'm wondering, how can I become a creator? YouTube came out, and a lot of people are content creators. They're not just consumers, right? So that's how I see it. Now, let me bust your head now. So did you know that there are like 3 billion minutes of call per day? 3 billion minutes of call per day. There are about 2.5 bytes of data, about 2.5 quintillion bytes of data every day being created. This is according to IBM, which is like over how many billion? That's quintillion is like 18 zeros of data. Now, to think about it, so you have 3 billion minutes of call per day. You have 5 billion Snapchat videos and photos per day. You have 333.2 billion emails per day. You have 1 million, 1 million, what's the name? 1 million calls, video calls online per day. Per minute, rather. This is per minute, right? So when you think about all of this data, you're wondering what can be made of it. That's what businesses are thinking of. Businesses are asking themselves, what can we get? So that's where we come to big data, right? Basically, that's the future. That's where everyone is going into. That's where your ChatGPT is from, because it gets big data. Now, what makes a data big data? It is the veracity, how truthful it is, the source. It's the value, how important that data is, the volume, how huge. We're talking about petabytes and quintillion bytes of data. The variety, whether it's unstructured. Today, we're getting data from your phone. You're getting data from your microwave. You're getting data from your wristwatches. You're getting data from your car. The variety of it. You're getting data from CCTV. There's a variety and the velocity of it as well. So that's the speed at which it's coming, right? So yeah, that's what makes it big data. This is what you call the 5 V's of big data. It's something that you're going to keep seeing. The world is going 5G makes internet even a lot more sweeter, as it were. So which means we're going to be getting bigger and bigger data if there's something like that. Right. But this is what makes the whole concept of big data. So the question, you've asked the question already of customer intelligence and what do I do? So here is my application of it. I basically work with customer data, right? And I report this data. And I predict customer behavior. That's my work, to predict customer behavior, to predict if this customer will come back, right? If the customer will come back to complain, if the customer will not come back, right? Given this thing, why would the customer come? Can we catch the customer before he even comes, or he or she comes to the business to reach out to complain? I can diagnose what the problem is. You know what, guys? This shop has not been receiving good number of people. We want to know what the problem is. We're like, okay, you know what is the general numbers of our shops that people come to? Why is this one going down? What is the number over the last couple of years, over the last couple of months? What is the problem? So we're diagnosing why there's a problem. Why are customers moving from a woof? What is the problem? Is there a conception? Is there a perception problem? That's why we have NPSs in business, the Net Promoter Score. Is there a perception problem? My work there is to find out why, provide the data why. It's somebody else's work to make sense of that why that I have provided and actually meet with the customer. So my work is not to so the data analyst work is not to source the data. That's the data engineer and data scientist to do, to source the data. My work is to get the work from the data from the source and do the analysis, to describe it. So I was talking about sponsor. That's the business unit, because sometimes you're not the one who requires the data, right? So you have somebody who handles the call center who is noticing a trend. And he's like, you know what? I need help. I need to understand why this is going down or why this is going up. And besides, before he even sees the going down, going up, it's because there is an existing chart that is showing that it is going down or it is going up. right? So that's the first thing I do, make it available to your eyes, see the dashboard. Then by the time you start asking me, okay, you know, why is it going down? Then I begin to do more deep dive analysis, right? And where I need help, I contact the business units who needs it, and they're like, oh, you know what? What's the problem here, and how can we get this done? And I say, okay, you know what, this is going down. Can you tell us what happened that day? Do you understand? So that makes sense. You're making sense of that particular data. So the expectation is that we'll be pointing out trends. Decisions can be made. Obviously, you do your analysis and allow C-suites to make their decisions, right? And you generate insights. Basically, how can we improve the system? How can we improve our services and all of those? So what skills are required? It's not all technical skills. I've mentioned all the technical skills that you require, but you see, in the role of data analyst, you need to communicate, right? Communication skills. Oh, you like to be on your own, you work at night. It works when you're just doing your own thing, but because you're not the business unit, you're not. So I had a course to work on a particular project that I did not even understand the data I was looking at, right? Now I could do visualization, do it, present, but it did not make sense. So I required help. I then met the team that was, generating that data. I'm like, guys, what do you do? What do you mean when this is this? What do you mean when this is that? And that's where communication skills and collaboration really comes in, right? Because you work with people to make sense of the data. It's not all you sitting down and finding the greatest insights in the world, but you need people who are in that field, especially in the case where it's not your field. That's why data analytics is a transferable skill set. Right. So problem solving, because you're asking the 5 whys. You're asking, why is this? Why is it? Why is it? Why is it? Why is it? 5 times. You're asking all of those why questions. So why is it bent? Why is the curve going down? Okay, it went down because of so why did that happen? Okay, why and why? 5, I mean, that's you see it everywhere. So always ask the 5 whys. Right. So, and then you do research because, like I said, you don't have all the details. You need to see what is the competitor doing? What is this other person? In the case of crime, when I was using crime to really learn, the question was always, what is the crime rate statistics in this other place? What kind of gun culture, it's applicable? What kind of gun rule or gun laws are applicable in this particular site? So what's the next step, guys? For me, basically, is to transition to being maybe an AI engineer, right? At some point in my life, that I'm really doing large language models, building and developing them for myself and making sense of it, and maybe possibly launching our own or my own chat GPT at some point, right? But that's the
That
next
would be
step for me.
interesting. So
That's
sorry, yeah.
exactly, yeah.
Let's double click on that for a bit. You mentioned having your own like chat GPT. So are we to assume like something like chat like a chat interface for customer intelligence? What would it look like if you were to
So
create
so
that? Yeah,
so the whole good one. I mean, this is envisioning here, right? So here's the thing about LLMs, that they have access to huge databases, unprecedented, in human history. That's what makes them a large language model, right, in the first place. So you need resources to make that happen. I mean, if I was going to go into that business, or when I'm going to go into that business, I need resources to make that happen. Now, but streamlining this to customer intelligence, let me just use this opportunity to say that the business is already the first to really do that in Nigeria. I mean, sorry, I'm blowing the horn of my business a little bit, right? So, but we already have our GPTs running for our Telegram purposes. But what would it look like? It will look like this. If you're going to do LLM, you are no longer constrained to customer intelligence per se. LLMs means that you have access, wide range, multiple source of data. It stops being LLM if it is streamlined. So there's what you call streamlined AI, right? Which means that everything customer intelligence, for example, is what it does. So the other day I was seeing strategy, right? There's a GPT model that has been built just for strategy, adapted just for strategy purpose, right? It
yeah.
analyzes the situation and it gives it to you as it is. So yes, that's what it will
I think
look
that's
like. It
why.
will look like, go on.
Yeah, sorry, I was gonna say I think that's why fine tuning now is like in high demand because you can fine tune
Exactly.
your model. So yeah,
Models. to suit what you want.
Yeah.
So yes, that's exactly what it will look like for customer intelligence purposes, right? You fine-tune it to customer behavior, customer calls, whatever it is. It doesn't necessarily need to be in the telecom sector that I am in. It could be in the banking sector, right? It could be in the oil sector, customer behavior generally. So it could be in HR because you're trying to, help your people do better. I once did a machine learning model for HR, right? Not HR in the business, but a HR thing, just to classify people when people come into their business. Where would the people fall?
Interesting.
So what's the next step? You learn, you apply what you've learned, then you transition into, I don't know, not everybody has to do data science, right? But for me, I feel like data analytics at some point may be taken over by applications, by GPTs, by AI. And it will make data analysis really redundant at some point if care is not taken, right? Because those processes can be automated, fully automated. The spooling of data, the analysis of data. In fact, as at today, once you put in your data, Power BI already can predict what you want from the data, right? Because of its unsupervised learning capabilities, right? So that's why I think that people should start transitioning to data science space in a place where they are now participating in creating of these models, right? Yeah. So into ML and possibly AI, we're almost done for time. So here's what it looks like. My day-to-day work, you can see Python, collabs. I mean, I cannot show you all of the details because it's business, right? So here's where you can learn Kaggle. You can get your data sets. You can participate in hackathons in Kaggle.com. DataWars.io allows you massive data to learn data Python for data analysis or R. You can do codeacademy.com. It's free courses. W3 Schools is where I usually go when I forget, there's a particular, I need to know the arguments to put in a particular place. I'm like, what's happening in W3 Schools, and I check it, especially for SQL. Then I've learned a ton from IBM Skills Build. Basically data, what type of data, what's the structured data, quantitative data, how do you deal with data from IBM Skills Build. I've learned huge from them. But here's what my day-to-day work really looks like, making sense of all of the data and writing scripts every now and then and functions. So yeah, time for Q&A section. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you so much for that insightful presentation. A lot to really munch over, and I'm really grateful because we have the slides, we have the recording, so it's going to be something we'll be looking into like a lot in coming days. We have a question from Elvis. Says, "Well done, Uzo.
Elvis.
Can you see it? Can you see the question? Okay, but let me just read it out so that everyone can,
Yeah, I can see the question. So
okay,
how do modern businesses
yeah, so it's asking how the modern businesses utilize unstructured data to analyze customer insights and enhance customer experience.
Thank you so much, Elvis. So here's the thing. The first thing we need to do is to agree on how to handle unstructured data. Unstructured data being, for example, pictures, voice recordings, what else again? Basically things that cannot be kept into table format, rows and columns, right? So in data analysis space, what you do for unstructured data is that you either transcribe it in the case of recordings, you transcribe these things into actual words, right? No longer just speaking. The applications that help you transcribe into words, and then you do maybe like a sentiment analysis over it. You see that we've gone from qualitative to quantitative, right? It could also be, so the question is, how do modern businesses utilize unstructured data? So the first point is to convert your unstructured data, right, into structured data for your analysis, or you move them into databases that support unstructured data, which is the NoSQL, MongoDBs, right, that are unstructured data driven, key and value pair. Then you can do an analysis from it, right? So, but the first point is that you know the type of data, you convert it to a quantitative type of data, right? And then quantitative here may not necessarily mean you're finding 2 times higher. It could be the nominal and ordinal, in the sense that you're just looking at qualitative, rather qualitative. It could just be that you're looking for, how many males are likely to do this? How many females are likely to do this? What is the facial expression of this person when he's leaving the office, right? And what kind of facial expression is it? Is it that the person is happy? The person may have chosen that they are sad, but they are happy. The person may have chosen that they are happy, but they are sad, right? So we can make sense of that data when the person leaves a shop, for example. If we're making a phone call, so if you do one of these interviews where you do a video recording of yourself, the AI service there actually analyzes your face and sees how confident you are, right? And gives a result. So that's how we can really make sense of this unstructured data. What type of unstructured data are we dealing with? Are they pictures? Are they voices? Are they faces, facial expressions? So that will give us insight as to what do we want to make of it. How do you increase customer experience? You know that when a customer is coming with this kind of face going forward, that's predictive now. You know what to do, right? I mean, here's a futuristic thing. Customer walks into the place and all the agents know that this customer is unhappy. How do we treat this customer? Right. So yeah, I hope that has helped.
Yeah.
My ex handle. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, please go ahead.
Uzo. I don't know. Mike will provide that one. I forgot to give
Okay.
it.
Yeah, that's fine. Let me just type it so that the person has it. Okay. Then there's a question from Domi.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Domi is asking, this has been very insightful. At what point in our learning journey can we start applying for internships and looking for real life work experience?
At your Excel point, right, you can start looking for those internships. So on Kaggle, there's a whole data set that teaches you from start to scratch of Python, from the data wrangling. Data wrangling is the most cumbersome part of your data, because you're trying to convert a date into a proper date format. You're trying to look for all of those data. So if you spool data from Excel sheet, Google Excel sheet, now you realize that there is space in some of them and there's no space in some of them. All of those data wrangling techniques takes a lot of time. So at your Excel part, if you find opportunities to do internship, grab it. Right. So yes, please, because you then begin to think. I believe that the internship then gives you opportunity to start practicing your Python.
Awesome. And not to forget that I think even at your Excel stage, the critical thinking skills can be applied to give insight. So there's one company that like back to your explanations on on structured data. There's one company, what they do is they analyze the success of ad campaign. And how do they do that? If a company, like let's say a Pepsi, for instance, they launch an ad campaign, right? How do they measure the impact
Yeah.
normally? So you might want to do social media metrics, likes, word of mouth, retweets, or just social media buzz and stuff. But this company goes the extra mile. They use emotional analysis where they look for situations where maybe they like have tests of where people watch this advert. What is their reaction like? you know. So they use
Mm-hmm.
facial analysis to know, yes, people really like this,
Analysis.
people don't like it, because sometimes the problem seems to be that with unstructured data, we don't really have this kind of formal way of looking at it like we do for structured data. For instance, when you have quantitative data, you might say, okay, yes, mean, ANOVA, regression, those techniques apply themselves
Mm-hmm.
easily,
Mm-hmm.
with your structured data, right? But then how do you use unstructured data? Like how do you run, let's say, regression, for instance, on your unstructured data, on voice,
Yeah.
so these are the tricky parts. And I think, my question now would be from your experience, Because I'm
Yeah.
quite sure you deal with voice data too. Um, you know, voice, maybe transcript data too. How is that space evolving, taking into, view advances in AI, advances in just general data analytics? What are some new things you could do now that you couldn't do, let's say, last year or 2 years ago?
Okay, good question, right? So at this point in our journey in the business, we're not yet analyzing what's the name? Voice-driven data using analytical tools at this point, but it's where we're going to. What were we able to do last? What can we do this year that we were unable to do last 2 years, where our reports were not automated, right? So in the sense that we almost always had to do the same analysis almost every single time. But as we speak, we can automate all of this process. You can automate an analysis, right? Such that you do it one time and you sit and watch it, predict it. And that's the power of, say, Power BI tool or Tableau. All of those processes can be automated. You do your SQL, you do the actual coding underneath, and then you don't have to do it again, except you need to tweak it. So that's where technology really has brought us to. So with regards to unstructured data, we're still finding ways. At this point, we're still matching humans to data, in the sense that we get the data, we look at what it's saying, then we actually then go and maybe, maybe customers complain that somebody was rude to them. Then we go and listen to that call, you see. Now, the tools that we use already does the sentiment analysis on the spot of the call. But sometimes you need to really go and listen to that particular call. So here's the thing. That's why I was saying that, people need to transition from data analysis to data science. Now, there are tools now that are doing those sentiments, those analysis on the spot, right? On the spot. You finish having a conversation and it gives you what the sentiment of that person is on the spot. Artificial intelligence driving us like that, right? So whether it's structured or unstructured, it gives you all of those things. So we need to do better with it. I don't know if that answered
Yeah,
the
it does. Yeah,
question.
it does. And actually, it's even giving me like, this challenge of, at least for everybody listening, because okay, somebody is saying right now, that's Ozone. So Ozone is
Yeah.
saying they really like customer intelligence because it doesn't constrain you to one industry alone. And like it's hearing people like you talk about the possibilities, right? It means you know they can now look at, okay, yeah, I can work in finance, I can work in um, oil and gas, I can work in banking, I can work in tech, in quotes, right? It's a customer intelligence analyst. And I think the next phase really will be looking at, okay, how do we now build in mechanisms for making sense from the kinds of data that we're not making sense of right now? Because if you could tell from the voice, right, emotional states, certain kinds of intention, you're just halfway there to predicting and to prescribing, right? And also, if you could just do on the spot real-time analysis, you don't really have to start wasting time with, okay, we need to transcribe first before we make sense of
Mm-hmm.
this data, stuff like that. So yeah, it's a very, very blossoming field. And because there's so much challenges, it gives new entrants, things to work on. Like we could say right now, okay, fine. From this video I've watched, I would like to work with, let's say, TikTok vendors, Instagram vendors, right? See,
Exactly.
yeah,
Business
see how,
ideas already.
yeah, so see how they are dealing with challenges with, sales, XYZ, because customer intelligence goes beyond just complaints. It could help you also look at, okay, what is the best thing to even recommend in the first place to this person? So yeah, like,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
so it's a very, very interesting field with a lot of potential because every business relies on it one way or the other. I don't know if anybody else has, okay, um, someone is asking based on your answer as it stands with AI, the way AI is eating up data, um, what do you suggest for someone coming in, let's say do you just move straight to machine learning or do you grow slowly? Yeah.
Okay. My suggestion is thank you so much, Ozone Hepsiba, for that question. My suggestion is to learn the very basics, right? Now transition fast. That's why I said don't dwell on Excel too long, right? Transition fast, especially into Python. The AI is basically written, the Python codes are also happening underneath, right? Transition into Python for data analysis, SQL, transition immediately. At the point that you're on Python, you can just even start applying machine learning. There are libraries. So here's the beautiful thing with Python. You don't necessarily need to know, now that helps, but you don't necessarily need to know how the model has been built in the sense that, no, not how the model has been, how the algorithm has been, written to help, right? All you need to know is the kind of data that you want and what to load. So yes, learn Excel, transition fast into Python, right? Why you're learning Excel most times is because you have people who Excel is all they have ever used in their life, right? And Excel sometimes is the simplest way. You just go do what you need to do instead of writing a Python code. Okay, so transition fast into Python, then transition at some point, not at some point, transition, learn Python, get your ground on it, use it for analysis, start to build models. You can start building models in Python. And once you start building models in Python, you can start applying machine learning practices to your models. At that point, you're already a superstar. Right. So yeah, I agree with you. You cannot remain in data analyst for forever. You need to start moving to proper spaces or data scientist spaces. I
Yeah, and
hope
just to
that
add to
answered
that,
your question. Yeah.
yeah, I was gonna ask first of all, what do you mean by fast? You mean fast like learn Excel for like 1 week or 2 weeks, right? Or what kind of approach would you really recommend? Because what I'm saying is you see some courses, right? Excel
All
courses,
right.
very, very, very broad, very, very like a massive courses. You could take Excel courses for a year if possible, right? Then
Yes,
then
true.
also, so if you don't have guardrails, like okay, let me just do at least Excel for like 2 weeks. Then after that, I'll, like just to build up on what you said, really,
Yeah,
maybe we could say learn Excel, work on problems, work on projects,
yeah,
maybe then I'm going to ask you, like as a customer intelligence person, what's the number
yeah.
of projects we should be looking at working on in Excel? Then also transition to Python, what kind of projects, what's the like, scale of projects you would be advising anyone to look at?
Okay, so in my own space now, obviously what I deal with is customer data, right? So I have projects around, say, why are customers calling us, right? What is the volume of calls? Customer center, basically call center, not exactly what's the name? Not exactly listening to the customer's calls per se, right? So it's a customer relations team who want to understand how best to serve a customer. So that's the why. You always have to understand why you're doing your data analysis. How best to serve a customer is always my why, right? If I move to a space of medicine, you see that data analysis part now is now maybe we want to discover the patterns of people with cancer. Even in psychology, what is the patterns of behavior for people who have cancer? What's their pattern of thinking? That is the why, right? So to really, I'll come back to your question of what the frequency or what the time is, but in terms of project that I'm working on, so I'm working on what kind of customers walk into our store, although we're still enhancing our predictive abilities. So but for now I am more on describing, right? I'm more on describing the kind of person that comes into our store on a typical Monday morning, on a Tuesday morning, on a July, right? And then I'm now asking, why does that person come into our school? Is it for problem? In fact, it's from data analysis things you see that we can then begin to make my MTN app that you have, because we see that some of those things that customers need to come and do, they can do it in the comfort of their houses. That's where it comes from. That's the whole insight generation, right? Because you're getting the service to the customer, but you're getting the reason why you should get that service to the customer. It's where data analysis comes from. Then also, yes, the question as to how long, would it take? Please, 2 months is enough time to do Excel, or even less, right? 2 months is enough time or less, because here's the thing about Excel. You don't need to know everything in Excel, for Christ's sake. That's why I said don't waste time. Know the basics, know what you need to do, ask questions for what you need to do, and do them. That's exactly how I learned it. I don't know. I didn't spend, in fact, the maximum time I spent, I'm not even going to lie, in any training for Excel, is 2 days. You know how those quick fire PwC kind of training, just do 2 days and you're good. You do 3 days, two heavy days, 2 concentrating days, those kind of things,
Yeah.
and you're good.
But that's because you
Because
have background knowledge already.
well, that too, but many times you have learners who come because they start from scratch to
Okay.
they start to professional. Now, but
Okay.
the main thing there is idea, that this is what you want to do, and you can always search
Yeah.
for what you want. Yeah,
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I think to also answer what the follow-up question he asked, because it was like from Excel to Python to building models. I think naturally, yeah, that's the way it usually flows,
that's how it
you
should
then,
go.
yeah,
So,
and yeah,
maybe we're missing out the section of visualization. So at the point where you're doing
yeah,
your Excel, Python, build models, usually visualization is like the lab, because you need to know how to present your data. You need to make a story out of your data.
yeah,
We get it. Yep,
yeah.
that's it.
So
So
just to,
maybe
yeah,
update that model, update your synopsis
okay,
to visualization part.
okay, yeah, yeah, I think we might need to have a separate call or a separate, yeah, if somebody said,
Amazing. Yes,
yeah,
yes.
yeah, visualization and automation. In fact, we're going to need to have another talk about just giving to automation because it's a very, very big issue right now in the business space. But we've really had a long bit of today, and really
Yes,
want
we
to
have.
thank everyone for showing up. It's our first meetup, and we are really trying to see how we can help people who are learning data analysis, people who are actually in the, just trying to find their way around tech, really, through this meetup. So, we're bringing on board professionals like Uzo who have deep domain expertise, to show you, okay, yeah, I can actually transition to tech meaningfully, right? Taking on this path, taking on these courses, having a focus on these sets of problems, and even having my own kind of special project that I want to work on. I mean, somebody could take what you've heard today and go build the next model on, working with voice data or, building your own GPT for customer intelligence or something to help people who are selling on TikTok with how to do better customer recommendation and stuff like that. So really want to thank everyone and special thanks to Uzo for really gracing us with your presence and your knowledge and being kind enough to, stick with us this long. So from us, I think that will
Thank
be
you
the
so
end of
much, Mike.
today's meetup. We'll be putting this up online because it's recorded, and also we'll be keeping in touch with anyone who has further questions. Please do reach out to us on Instig Labs on Twitter. And also we'll be launching our YouTube channel very, very soon. So just keep your heads up for information and or whatnot. So thank you very much, guys, and thank you very much, Uzo, once more. From us signing out.
Thank you for the
Yeah.
Bye, everybody. Thank you for participating.